Alright everyone, we have a hell of a lot to unpack today. I'll start out, of course, analyzing the Trump indictment stuff. We also separately have to talk about the results in Chicago for their mayor's race, in Wisconsin for the open Supreme Court slot there actually, and what that means going forward. A predictable result in the end, unfortunate on both counts, but predictable, so analysis needed, of course. Also caffeine needed. Thankfully, I've already guzzled half of my cup already. Don't worry, you can clank along today. We're going to be doing a lot on the live stream. Make sure to stay tuned and join me on YouTube and Rumble for some more foibles and adventures. Anyway, 2 links in the description. The first is to Trump's Mar-a-Lago speech that he did a few hours after the arraignment yesterday. Second is to a clip involving Alvin Bragg actually asking press questions, one of them particularly and noteworthily bizarre as far as what they're doing with the indictment thus far. The whole process the other day only took about an hour anyway. Trump was in, got fingerprinted, went into the court where they had some pictures that they allowed 5 press members to take. No cameras or anything. They're keeping the process very, very tight and very, very opaque. And I have a feeling that there's a reason for that. Probably ties into what Bragg just said actually at the presser thereafter. First, we'll go to Trump's response, though. This is 2016 form Trump. You should watch it for yourself. By the way, if you don't have a Rumble channel, you should probably have one. Trump coming out, he blasts the investigation and very wisely does 2 things, actually. First, he repeatedly, and you may have noticed this is not a common feature when Trump speaks. Oftentimes, he centers things around himself. This time, he did more of a it's us that they're after thing. This is more true to form in 2016 than what he meandered into more recently, 2020, 2022. And it's a better form overall for him, not just situationally. I wish that he would give speeches like this more often. This was very measured and very good. This is the kind of Trump that we need back, and this is the kind of Trump he'll need to be if he stands a chance of winning a general election. I suspect that based on the recent polling and the huge bump for Trump that we're seeing, he's probably already won the GOP's primary, regardless of what form this case actually takes. Secondly, he invokes not just the concept of that collective persecution, invokes the Soviet Union and also begins talking about other people associated with him that have been mistreated. For example, speaking about some of his associates that effectively they were threatened by the government. This happened to Manafort, this happened to Giuliani and others. Basically, if you flip on Trump and give us what we want, no punishment for you. Otherwise, we're going to throw the book at you and you'll probably spend the rest of your life in prison. And this seems to have been a fairly common theme for multiple Trump associates throughout time. And what Trump is doing is painting a picture where it's like, hey, yes, they want to get me, quite clearly. I'm central to this. But they're willing to go through literally anybody else and abuse them in order to do so. It does speak to a wider scale persecution. We can, and this is the perennial thing that I rhetorically ask people, which am I supposed to suppose? Donald Trump is uniquely corrupt and devious, and surrounded himself with uniquely corrupt and devious people. By the way, all of those getting prosecuted, none of them are the unipartyists that he ever put in his cabinet or anything. Or do I think that the whole system? So do I think that one apple in the barrel is rotten, or do I suspect that the whole barrel is rotten and occasionally I stumble upon an apple that's still edible? Well, the latter seems to be the case. What the case is that Donald Trump probably has engaged in business malpractice. Of course, when you're running multi-billion-dollar empire for, 5 decades, you might accidentally leave out a 0 once in a while. And notice that does not appear to be what they're actually charging him for here. Again, we'll talk about the charges because, we don't know what they are, actually. We only have vagaries to go on. We have to take Alvin Bragg's word for it that the charges are appropriate. That's effectively what they're doing. By the way, the legacy media completely reluctant to do its job and do a write-up and say, look, what the fuck is going on? They're not even telling us what they're specifically charging, what specific allegations were made. They're just going to tell us the broad header of what type of allegation it is. So it's effectively, they've unsealed the indictment, but only halfway. And Alvin Bragg is very puffed up when he points out, well, there's no law that requires it. No, but don't you think it's in the public interest to know exactly what the fuck is going on? I guess it's not abnormal because we've already crossed the Rubicon. We've already gone across the Rubicon in the sense that now almost 2.5 centuries of civic and legal precedent have been thrown out. It almost surprises me the judge doesn't immediately issue a gag order because, hey, if you're going to abuse the man and persecute him, why not go all the way? Why not score a touchdown instead of perching on the 20-yard line? I guess they're in a holding pattern right now. I suspect that they're not really... I don't think that they think that the charges have much behind them, which is why we're not getting the specific charges, by the way. Therefore, they throw the book at Trump, everything under the sun they think could possibly have him found guilty, and then they'll block it down in procedures for many, many moons. And so they will continuously try to distract people while trying to take Trump off the campaign trail by forcing him to show up at a courthouse every once in a while. That's what I suspect is the plan. Whether it works or not remains to be seen. Of course, Trump can always hide out, as the libtoids are saying, in Trump Tower, which is not far from the actual court where the proceedings in Manhattan are taking place, and wall himself off in the top floor and make videos there all day if he really wants to when he's not in court. He doesn't have to go back to the Mar-a-Lago, although I think he probably likes the weather better most of the year. The second clip is Alvin Bragg being asked by the media. Are we going to know the specific charges? Because it doesn't seem that that's part of the release that we've currently gotten. No, says Alvin Bragg, but I'll give you a few very, very scrawny details. Some of it amounts to election law, apparently. So originally, we were led to believe that it had to do with business fraud. So we're talking the payment to Stormy Daniels or to certain others, marked as legal expenses. It appears that they've gone beyond that, and now they're looking into election law. For some reason, Bragg mentions federal law as well, despite the fact that this is a state-level case. But we don't know what the specific charges are or what they're pertinent to. We don't know what payments. We don't know what specific elements of election law were violated. Only the broad header of, well, somebody went beyond campaign finance limits for the state of New York or something like that. Well, that doesn't tell me anything. Who was involved? Was it Trump himself? Was it an associate middleman you're alleging was involved? What was the total? Did they go $5 above the total? Did they go $5 million above the total? Are you talking about money laundering? You'd think that they would want to parade the charges out on a silver platter and hand out gold embossed sheets listing specifically the individual charges and why they were brought, and give them to the legacy media at the very least to be gatekeepers of how it's originally interpreted for the purposes of propaganda. You'd think that if their case was cut and dry, open and shut, that's what they would do, but they're doing exactly the opposite. Every aspect of this screams political witch hunt, and every aspect of this screams we don't really have a strong case and we're desperate, which is what I suspected when they first indicted him. I've suspected for a long time that all of the legalese surrounding Trump, it's not out of a position of strength, although they do want to project that and demoralize populism. Part of it is out of desperation. They're terrified that Trump will pull it off again and that all the honking in the world can't stop it, and that they'll have to deal with another 4 years of someone that's in the executive capacity going to break the toys. And that's breaking the toys. That doesn't make them money. Again, I consider the entire system to be corrupt. I've got mountains of evidence that it is. The only evidence that I have of Trump being corrupt is that he's repeatedly investigated. Up until now, he's never been indicted. And on this particular case, again, it was passed over multiple times. It was passed over by the DOJ. It was passed over by the Election Commission. And originally, until, of course, he was being pressured from without during a campaign, originally it was even passed on by Alvin Bragg. Then he bragged about the fact that he would get Trump if he was elected, thus getting elected in the process because everyone there in Manhattan knew what they were voting for. They were voting for exactly what's happening now. It's a crying shame that apparently a large proportion of Americans have no problem with what's currently going on. By the way, that Snap poll that says, well, a majority of Americans, although not a huge majority, approve of indictment, but a much larger majority do believe it's political in nature. There's a disturbing overlap there with people who have no problem with political witch hunts then. I suppose that they do not understand anything about the concept of the right to a fair trial or the right to privacy. It's disturbing, although I do not trust any single poll. So I will remain a little bit less pessimistic about those numbers because they may entirely be falsified. At this point, polls on that sort of opinion piece mean less than nothing to me because they are repeatedly wrong. By the way, to the anti-Trump people, could be that it's wrong in the other direction and more Americans than 40%, less Americans than 40% disapprove of what's going on. I would point out that that's effectively all Republicans and a significant block of independent voters, which is about the kind of coalition that you need to win a general election. I see a lot of demoralization shills out there, some of which have ties to other Republican candidacies, including Nikki Haley for some reason. She's not going anywhere fast. So, we'll be talking on the live stream later more about this. Also, the disturbing political connections of the judge in the case, as well as his daughter, apparently. I'll be looking into that a little bit more just to get more info, though, before I include that on the live stream later. So, yeah, definitely pay attention to that one because it's going to be extremely high energy. Much like Donald Trump's response at the Mar-a-Lago the other day. That's about all. Peace out.